The courtroom hummed with a quiet, expectant energy, the kind that often precedes the unfolding of human drama in its most raw and unfiltered form. Judge Ebony K. Williams sat behind the bench, her presence commanding and composed, an anchor in the storm of conflicting narratives. She looked out over the room, her gaze steady, reflecting a lifetime of experience that spanned from the red clay of North Carolina to the vibrant rhythm of Louisiana, tempered by the sleek sophistication of the West Coast and the sharp, undeniable edge of New York. To her, this courtroom was not merely a physical space. It was a sanctuary where the abstract concept of equal justice became a living, breathing reality. It was a place where freedom and integrity were not just words, but the guiding stars by which she navigated the complexities of the cases brought before her. Her attention shifted to the first case of the day, a dispute that felt smaller in scale, but was monumental in the emotional weight it carried for the parties involved. Bradford Kingston stood as the plaintiff, his posture rigid with the indignity of a man who felt his professional reputation had been unfairly tarnished. Across from him, Leanne Davis held her ground with the conviction of a business owner who believed she had been victimized by an employee she had come to distrust. The air between them was thick with accusation and defensive posturing. Bradford, a man whose career was built on the delicate and vital foundation of childhood development, found himself in the uncomfortable position of having to defend his integrity against allegations of theft. He had served as a teacher at Leanne's daycare facility for approximately 2 months, a period that began with promise but rapidly deteriorated into a landscape of suspicion and hostility. Judge Williams listened as Bradford detailed his side of the story, his voice steady even as he recounted the feeling of being an outsider in an environment that seemed inherently wary of him. He was, by his own account, the only male teacher at the facility, a reality that Leanne had made clear was, in her eyes, a point of contention from the very start. He spoke of the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, ways he was made to feel unwelcome, the comments about the unusual nature of a man working with children that had gnawed at his professional confidence. The tipping point, he explained, was when Leanne accused him of stealing a drivable toy car and a designer watch. There was no clear proof, only the shadow of suspicion cast by an employer who seemed to have predetermined his guilt. His resignation had been his only recourse, a way to escape a situation that had become increasingly toxic. When it was Leanne's turn to speak, her defense was as blunt as it was unconvincing to the court. She insisted that because Bradford had been the only person in the vicinity at the time the items vanished, he was the only possible culprit. She presented video footage as her evidence, a grainy, limited clip that showed Bradford present in the classroom, a space where he was supposed to be as part of his job. Judge Williams watched the footage with a critical eye, noting that it proved nothing beyond his presence in the building. As the investigation continued, the court opted for a tool that often stripped away the veneer of defensive rhetoric, the polygraph. The tension in the room was palpable as the results were revealed. The machine, indifferent to the personal biases and prejudices of the parties involved, delivered a clear verdict. Bradford Kingston was telling the truth. He had not stolen the toy car, nor had he taken the watch. The silence that followed the announcement of the results was heavy, a stark contrast to the accusations that had filled the room only moments before. Judge Williams looked at Leanne, her expression one of stern disappointment. It was evident that the accusations were not born of hard evidence, but of a deep-seated prejudice, a stereotypical view that had clouded Leanne's judgment and led her to treat an employee with unnecessary and harmful hostility. The ruling was decisive. Judge Williams acknowledged the merit of Bradford's claim, noting that his resignation, even without the standard notice, was a reasonable reaction to the environment he had been forced to endure. She awarded him the full amount of $3,000 he had requested for his unpaid wages and dismissed Leanne's counterclaim in its entirety. The message was clear. A courtroom is not a place for the enactment of personal biases, and an employer's suspicion, no matter how strongly felt, cannot replace the requirement for objective, verifiable truth. As the echoes of the first case faded, the courtroom prepared for the second, a dispute that touched on the fragile intersection of vanity, social expectation, and the often misunderstood boundaries of personal expression. Melissa Craig and Sasha Griffin stood before the bench, neighbors whose relationship had been fractured by a single, messy incident involving a luxury blouse and a glass of red wine. Melissa, the plaintiff, sought damages of $600, claiming that Sasha had intentionally ruined her new garment during a dinner outing. The story Melissa told was one of personal transformation. She spoke of her recent procedures, a mommy makeover that had left her feeling proud and eager to showcase the results of her investment in herself. She had worn the blouse specifically to highlight this new chapter in her life, a decision that had led to an interaction with Sasha's husband that she described as an innocent sharing of information. Sasha's perspective was radically different. She maintained that Melissa's behavior had been profoundly inappropriate, that the act of unbuttoning her blouse in a public setting to show off the results of her surgery to a friend's husband was an affront to decency. She claimed that her attempt to cover Melissa with her own jacket had been a gesture of modesty, a way to shield the group from what she perceived as an act of public indecency. The accusation of throwing a glass of wine at Melissa was met with a denial from Sasha, who insisted that the spilling of the wine was a consequence of the chaotic and, in her view, unnecessary attempt to force decorum upon her neighbor. Judge Williams observed the two women, recognizing that the conflict was less about a stained blouse and more about the clashing values of two individuals living in the same social sphere. She scrutinized the garment, now a victim of the red wine that had effectively ended its utility, and acknowledged the financial loss that Melissa had suffered. However, the core of the issue for the judge was the lack of boundaries shown by both parties. She pointed out that Sasha, regardless of her personal moral convictions regarding Melissa's attire, had no authority to police her neighbor's body or her clothing choices. The act of forcing a jacket upon someone, leading to the destruction of their property, was an overreach that the court could not condone. In her final ruling, Judge Williams leaned into the importance of respecting individual autonomy. While she might have found the display of clothing choices to be a matter of personal taste, she was firm in the legal reality. Sasha had interfered with Melissa's personal property, and that interference had resulted in a loss that the defendant was responsible for covering. The court ruled in favor of the plaintiff for the full $600, a resolution that served to close the chapter on the dispute between the two neighbors. The case served as a reminder that, even in the most trivial of circumstances, the principles of mutual respect and the recognition of personal boundaries remain essential to the maintenance of peace within a community. The day concluded as it had begun, with the quiet dignity of the courtroom settling back into the space. Judge Williams had navigated the complexities of two very different conflicts, each providing a window into the intricacies of human behavior. She had listened, she had analyzed, and she had delivered justice with a steady hand, reinforcing the notion that in a world often dominated by noise and misunderstanding, there is a place for clarity, for truth, and for the fair application of the values that define a just society. The lessons of the day were simple yet profound, that one's prejudices should not dictate their actions toward others, and that the boundaries of personal freedom, however much they may clash with the perceptions of those around us, are a fundamental aspect of the lives we choose to lead. As the parties exited the courtroom, they carried with them the resolution of their disputes, leaving behind the weight of their accusations and the heat of their emotions, replaced by the finality of the law. The courtroom stood ready for another day, a testament to the enduring pursuit of equity, guided by the wisdom and the vision of those tasked with the heavy responsibility of delivering it.